Hello, and welcome to EZRA Asks, where each episode we invite in a leading thinker, a special guest, to help us grapple with a question related to the world of work and professional development. My name is Sinead Keenan, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at EZRA. And today, our question is, are humans at risk of being left behind in the AI boom? Is AI really set to disrupt the world of work? And what does that mean for people teams, for HR, for learning and development teams? As individuals look to use AI in their roles, what does that really mean for organizational culture? Is it leading? Is it lagging behind? Will AI create roles? Will it replace roles? What are the most pressing applications? And what does this mean for the average worker? What will it be like in 5 years' time? All really interesting and pressing questions. And here to help us answer some of those questions is the one and only Simon Lambert. Welcome to the show, Simon.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us. So, Simon, just before we dive into some of these very important questions, a little bit about you. So I know that very recently you celebrated 25 years at Microsoft. And as we talked about before, clearly meant that you joined when you were in primary
14,
school. 14,
yeah.
14, correct, obviously. And in your role today as Chief Learning Officer at Microsoft UK, you are responsible for leading culture and skills strategy in the UK and driving execution for customers, partners, employees, and future generation skilling. Amazing role. You, I know, are passionate, and I know this from firsthand experience, about unlocking the potential in every person and organization. And I also happen to know that you've got a background in sports and fitness as a qualified fitness instructor and sports psychology graduate. So tell us, with all of that, what really brought you here today to help us grapple this question on AI?
Well, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for telling everyone just how long I've been at the organisation.
You're welcome.
So I think we are at a seminal moment in tech. And having been at the company for a long time, having been in tech for a long time, I was lucky enough to experience some of those other moments. So the advent of the internet, the arrival of the mobile phone, the creation of cloud. And it really feels like we're at another one of those points in time when we are literally going to be welcoming a brand new technology that's going to fundamentally change the way we live, the way we work, the way we learn. Obviously, I'm very interested in that. And I think it's just one of those interesting problems that we need to kind of come together on in terms of how are we going to fully maximize the potential of this technology. It's very exciting.
It is indeed. And I love how you framed that up for us. So it's a real inflection point in time and history where, really that rate of change, that development is just going to take off. That's what we believe. So we're going to get into all of that. Before we do, though, as you know, Simon, at EZRA, we believe in the superpower of coaching. And that coaching helps individuals unlock their own superpowers. So having heard all about you and your experiences, I'm going to ask you, what is your superpower?
Well, funnily enough, I recently redid Strength Finders, which is obviously one of the many routes through to understanding your strengths. And my number one was learner. And so I have to say, I think one of my superpowers is that willingness to continue to learn, have that insatiable curiosity about what's happening around us. But I also did a piece of work many years ago about defining my leadership proposition, if you like. And I do love the idea of great ideas. I just love great ideas. So I like to think of myself as an insightful, incisive, and inclusive purveyor of great ideas.
Well, I absolutely love that. And you're really in the right job, I would say, hearing all that. And it's so nice that's really coming through for you as your superpower, that like lifelong learning, insatiable curiosity. So we're a bit curious about you, Simon. We've got a few rapid fire questions for you, and I know you don't know what any of these are,
No.
so here goes. But just to warm us up. So, would you rather be able to travel backwards or forwards in time?
Forwards.
So fast. Love it. Would you rather go on a winter skiing holiday or a summer beach holiday?
Beach.
Beach, any day. You and I have had this chat before. Hobnob biscuits, chocolate or no chocolate?
No chocolate.
Disagree.
That's just wrong.
I disagree. Okay. For another day. Would you rather lose your laptop for 24 hours or your phone?
Phone.
Phone. Interesting. Okay. Would you rather have a phone call or a Teams meeting or do instant messaging?
Phone call.
Yeah,
I think we've lost the art of having the spontaneous call.
I know.
And I really want to bring that art back. I think it's
know.
fantastic.
I know. I keep reading about telephobia, like younger generation being terrified of the telephone, which I think is very interesting. But again, one for another day. So yes, bring back the phone call. Would you rather use voice commands or to control everything at home or control devices manually? Old school.
Manually.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. And would you rather, last one, speed up AI innovation or keep going at the pace that it is now?
I think we should enjoy the moment.
Mm-hmm. Enjoy the moment.
Enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
And actually, I think taking a slightly slower, more controlled approach is probably better.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. So let's from there, let's get into our big topic for today. And I'd love to just start a little bit, Simon, with your personal journey around AI. So when you first heard those two letters, AI, how did it start to affect your work life, your personal life? What's been your experience with using it or not?
Well, I'm very passionate about how technology can help others and change people's lives positively.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously when I look at the opportunity around AI, my immediate response was, this is really quite an exciting time. And, when people ask that question, when you think back through your career, what's the best time of, when you had in your work? And I honestly believe it's right now, because I think we're at this point where we've got this technology that can help people's lives. And actually, we've got a whole raft of people that need to understand more about what this technology can and can't do and how to operate with it. And that's brilliant for a learning and development guy, right? Because ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to help individuals, customers, future generations truly understand the opportunity associated with this tech. And that I just find that quite, exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But also really challenging, because, there are a certain degree of, I'm sure we'll get onto it, I'm sure there's some perceptions that people have about the tech. And I think the other thing I'd say, again, as an L&D person, is I think it's incumbent on anyone that works in learning and development to be able to make that direct connection between how learning can fundamentally help a company or an organization grow. And so I really love that challenge, being able to demonstrate the direct link between being able to provide people the opportunities to learn, develop skills and grow, and the impact that then can have on the organization.
It's beautifully put. And I think I'm thinking of some of our listeners who might be heads of learning, heads of talent, and probably feeling a little bit, we certainly hear this from our clients, feeling the pressure of, what are you doing around AI? How's that showing up in the organization? How are you supporting with that? And that's such an empowering, quite inspiring message, I think, which is that you have that unique role to help people understand how this connects to growth, how this connects to impact, and why we should embrace it, not shy away from it. So that is, I think that is so exciting. And as somebody learning myself, I think that it's a really privileged position, right, to be in. And leading on from that, do you feel that our kind of organizational culture, workplace culture, is keeping up and adapting quickly enough to AI? And if so, how do you know?
Well, I would probably start with the organizational culture of the company that I work for,
Yeah,
because that's the one I live and breathe every day.
absolutely.
And I'd certainly say that we've been through a number of business transformations. And I think AI is another business transformation. And it's really about how you build the culture and to enable that within within the organization. And I think our CEO, a global CEO who is incredibly passionate about learning, which is also very helpful for me and for anyone that works in L&D, I think he put it brilliantly by saying that we're moving from a group of people who know it all to a group of people who want to learn it all. And when you think about that, at the heart of that principle of moving from know-it-alls to learn-it-alls is this idea of a growth mindset. And, we've talked a lot about this. Satcher in his book has kind of talked about this as well. But it's creating that environment where people want to want to learn it all, and also have developed this kind of curiosity about what's going on around them. And so I think it's as much a leadership challenge as it is anything, because I do think that culture is determined by leaders within the organization. What are the systems, the symbols, the behaviors, the stories that you want to tell when it comes to bringing your culture to life? And I think it's also recognized, I think our data suggested this, that something like 76% of employees in the data that we surveyed said that they would stay at their company longer if they're given more opportunity for learning and development.
Study. Yeah.
And many employees believe that actually learning requires leaving, and that's clearly not what you want to try and do. So I think as you think about company culture, and I think about and reflect on the company culture that we have, it is very much putting learning and at the heart. And I also recognize that it's one of the biggest challenges that many L&D people have, which is how to build a culture of learning. But I think it's critical. It's critical anyway, but it's really critical right now.
What would your advice be then, Simon? Because I think, as you said, you have a CEO who has been very much at the forefront on this, but on learning, growth mindset, and this, is really, I think, well established on that. But for other organizations coming to this a little bit later, like what advice would you have for your peers, for heads of learning development in other organizations where this, people don't necessarily have that same learning mindset and might actually be feeling nervous, threatened around what does this mean? What does this mean for my role?
I mean, cultural change doesn't happen overnight, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to make a commitment to do that. But I would say that I think fundamentally organizations need to think about how they want to transform all aspects of their business. I mean, it's interwoven into the fabric of the organization, right? So how do employees relate to each other? How do they develop skills? What skills do they have? What processes do you have? What are the principles that are guiding your behavior? So I think starting sort of right there in terms of what is your purpose ultimately? How do you kind of define, the purpose of the organization, and then what's the culture that you want to live to bring that to life? I think is critical. And, Microsoft's purpose is very clear, right? Our mission statement's been very clear for a few years now, which is to enable every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And that ultimately defines, where we start. But I do think it's leaders really need to really have a good look at where they are today, where they want to be, and what changes they need to make across their organization.
What you said there struck a chord for me around, culture doesn't change overnight. And I was thinking about, habit formation, so ingrained. How do we break habits, think differently, continuously learn? This is difficult, right? So what have you seen that's worked well in terms of, because for many people this is requiring quite fundamental shifts in how they interact, how they work, the tools that are available to them, the very ingrained habits and how we've been going to work for years. And now we might need to think about that in a completely different way. What have you seen work well when it comes to habit change?
I think, again, I can only reflect on some of the learnings that we've had. I think the first one is you have to make time and space for learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I completely appreciate that's really difficult. But learning shouldn't seem something that's added on to your job. Learning has to be a part of your job. In fact, when you look at some of the data around the average half-life of a skill being less than 5 years now, when you look at some of the data around the average tenure in a job is less than 4.5 years, learning is a permanent requirement of work. And because it's a permanent requirement of work, you have to give people the time and the space to be able to do that. And so time and space, critical. There's various different ways in which organizations can try and do that. We have a number of opportunities where we try and create defined learning moments, whether that be a learning day or a learning week or a learning month or whatever it may be. But there are other mechanisms that people can use to do that. I think the second thing that I would call out is really about leaders modeling the right behavior. And so, leaders should, little things like taking time at the beginning of a team meeting just to reflect on, has anyone got a learning moment? What did you learn? Share it with the rest of the group. Really reinforcing the importance of learning as part of a company culture. Celebrate learning. Not many organizations actually celebrate people. And it's not so much the learning, I think, that people should be celebrating. It's actually the application of the learning. So people go to courses. Going to a course, that's cool, well done. But it's actually more about how have you applied what you've learned in that course to your day-to-day business, which is really where the celebration starts, because it's as important to acknowledge when things don't quite go right as it is when things do. And so giving people the opportunity to share those learnings and share what they've learned and effectively reflect on it, I think is a critical part of any culture. Obviously, you need to measure. Somehow you need to measure what it is that you're trying to achieve. Various different employee listening mechanisms that you can employ across the organization. It gives you a pulse. So I think that's important. And I think probably one of the things that people need to be reinforced is how important it is to learn from each other. I have this bugbear actually, which is people always tell me that they never have enough time for learning.
Yeah.
And I get it, right? I've worked in commercial parts of the organization. I get how challenging and it is, but actually that's because people don't necessarily recognize learning moments. So learning, I think, is often defined as I've attended a course, I've followed a learning pathway, whatever it may be. But actually, you can learn from each other. You can learn from a customer. You can learn from listening to a podcast. You can learn from reading a book. And actually, throughout the course of your average day, there will be many different learning moments. And I think part of the challenge with creating a culture of learning is ultimately how do you help people to recognize those learning moments? Because otherwise, people are always going to say, I never have enough time. And there's very different ways in which you could do that. But I think that's one of the big challenges we all face in learning and development is time for learning. And how do you get people to recognize that they're actually doing learning when they don't necessarily recognize it? And that's one of the really exciting things about AI, I think, actually, is how AI is going to effectively really truly bring the learning in the flow of learning in the flow of work to life.
Yes.
Because I think it's one of those tools that you can use side by side with you. So,
absolutely. I mean, just today, actually, I was this morning I was talking to some sales colleagues, and we were talking about these AI summaries that you now get from your calls that you've had with clients, with customers, which summarize the key points, and we were reflecting on the small talk that happens, rapport building at the beginning of a conversation. And it was with some colleagues in Australia, and they were saying, if you look at all the summaries, like Taylor Swift is the main thing we're all talking about. at the at the beginning of conversations, because she must be touring there, I don't know what. And we were just talking about how interesting would that be now that you could actually do an analysis of, like, in different cultures, in different regions, how do people build rapport? Like, we can actually see that, like this, what are the things that people do to make that connection, which I just thought was fascinating, interesting and useful application of AI right now available.
Yeah, no, definitely. And as an aside, actually, one of the things I love using Copilot for is, I get invited to many different meetings, and often I can be a few minutes late for them. And so when you join the meeting, you can literally ask Copilot, "What did I miss?"
Really?
And then it will give you, like, the summary of the last
so
10
cool.
minutes or however long you've missed. And so you can catch up, but it always takes out that kind of small talk because it's not, they recognize it. So, but I find that incredibly helpful.
Yeah. But you're not getting the Taylor Swift information.
But which is okay.
you can live with that. And I suppose continuing with that theme, like, we obviously see a lot in popular media, varying perspectives in AI, and some of them are quite amusing, and some are, people are quite concerned about it. What are you seeing as some of the most kind of common misconceptions around AI? Like, what questions are you getting asked the most around it?
I think there's probably two that spring to mind immediately. The first is that AI can do anything.
Right.
And actually, I think it's good at certain things.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a really interesting challenge for learning and development, because it's part of the learning journey, right? To identify that. And I think the second thing is, the implications it has on jobs. And I think that, and we talk a lot about this, and we get asked these questions quite a lot, which is, if you're trying to give people the opportunity to increase productivity, you need to strike the right balance between AI and human agency, right? So where do you put that balance? Where is that balance? Because I think it's often seen as it's an either or, and the reality is it's not an either or; it's an and. Because we talk very much about AI being a co-pilot, not an autopilot. And with that, it means, helping people achieve more by having AI work by their side. So it's complementary. And so I do think we need to be intentional about how it's used and how we bring it to life. And I do think that AI can lift the capabilities of any organization. But again, I would put it back down to, you've got to create the right culture to be able to make sure that you're being very intentional about AI and how you're using it, and ultimately give people the opportunity and space to experiment with it, because that's the only way people are going to learn with it, is to actually use it and experiment with it, and then understand what tasks they need to do themselves and what tasks they can delegate to AI, because of this complementary nature. So I do think that there is this idea that that AI is going to fundamentally change the shape of jobs. And of course, with any technology, when you introduce any technology or any new thing, new jobs get created, old ones change. And so if you think back to, I don't know, social media, right? Who would have thought in the advent of social media we would have a social media marketing manager? I think it's commonplace now for software developers, to have to continue to stay up to speed with things. I think, the idea of having data scientists, people that manage data, a few years ago, those specialist data roles weren't that commonplace. So I think with new technology comes new opportunity. And I think that's really where we want to focus the conversation, because it's actually really exciting when you think about some of the ways in which AI is going to not only enhance the ability for people to be more productive, but then it's also going to enable them to have more opportunity to be creative, because they're freeing up their time from the sort of traditional mundane tasks, because they can hand that over to AI. And I think that whole kind of creative element of the human is so important.
And I really love that. That sort of that notion of AI as co-pilot, as they're beside you to kind of free you up from some of that sort of mundane tasks to do the more interesting, intrinsically human, distinctively human things, creativity, innovation, whatever it might be, connecting with other people. So that, I think that's such a sort of an inspiring way of framing this conversation. And just, so we've talked a little bit about impact on roles, how it may change roles. We've talked about some of the tools. Are there other sort of significant changes that you're already seeing, be it at Microsoft or other organizations that you're aware of or working with when it comes to AI at work?
Well, I think there's a couple of things I'd say there. Firstly, we obviously do lots of data and study and all that kind of stuff. And I'd say that because we're at this sort of era of unprecedented sort of transformational technological change, we talk to business leaders, and I think there is a high proportion, something like 52% of business leaders saying the UK is racing against time to become an AI superpower. And I think that's really interesting that only half business leaders believe that. I think with the advent of, obviously, large language models, which is ultimately what allows us to do generative AI, 54% of business leaders surveyed are concerned that their workforce lacks the skills to be able to make the most out of AI. So we're talking a lot about technology where people don't necessarily know how to take full advantage of it, how to use it. And actually, when it comes to future-proofing the business, only 25% of business leaders have said that they've actually implemented like a talent strategy to recruit people who can, successfully implement AI across their business. And yet only 26% of those leaders have actually done any learning on it. And so what we want to try and do is we want to try and give people the opportunity to really understand more about what AI is. So we made a commitment back in October last year, which is an extension of our commitment to provide digital skills to 1.5 million people in the UK. We made a commitment to actually equip 1 million people on top of that with the skills needed to thrive in an AI economy. And so what we're doing at the moment is we're actually doing a lot of work to try and open up opportunity for learning, certainly on our technology, with our customers and our partners and individuals and IT professionals and everyone, because we believe that the only way you're going to really truly understand this technology is by spending time kind of learning about it. So we've made that commitment, and I'd say that is effectively a contribution that we're trying to make to the UK, because we obviously have a significant role to play in the kind of the adoption of this technology.
It's an amazing mission. Upskill, 1 million people is incredible.
That's by 2025. So, we've given ourselves a deadline.
Get your skates on, Simon.
Well, yeah.
But there's also that, I think something I'd love to explore with you a little bit is, it's not, is it inherently good? There is such a concept as responsible and irresponsible AI, right? And I think that's something many of us are only really getting to grips with. So perhaps you could just define a little bit, what does AI, like irresponsible AI practice, mean?
Well, let's talk about responsible AI, I think, rather than the other way around. I think certainly those people that are building and deploying AI have an obligation to do so responsibly and safely. And I think with any new technology, there can be some unintended and unforeseen consequences. And I think it's incumbent on all of us and any organisation to make a concerted effort to anticipate and mitigate against those unintended consequences of the technology. So we take this responsibility very seriously. And so we've implemented, for example, things like responsible AI principles that we effectively had in place now for about 6 or 7 years, I think it is. We've also implemented responsible AI standards, which we share with all of our customers and partners. And actually, it's really about having it, interwoven into the development cycle of what we do. And so we basically try to make all of our AI systems responsible by design. So we're incredibly committed to that. I think things like privacy, security, transparency, inclusiveness, accountability, incredible principles that we try, incredibly important principles, reliability, safety, because we want people to be able to feel comfortable with the technologies that, is there. And there's lots of concern over, over some of these things. But we put those in place across our organization. And we are having conversations with lots of different companies about how they might want to think about doing something similar.
Yeah. Yeah. And it certainly resonates. I think it's something, it's a concern we hear, right? How is it being used? What does it mean for privacy, confidentiality? What if it goes rogue? What could that? So I think it's absolutely right that you are really focused on that and leading so much of the thinking around responsible AI. And as you mentioned that you're looking at upskilling, huge part of the workforce. Thinking about people who might be listening today. So again, folks in learning and development, talent leaders, HR leaders. What would you say is the number one or the top 2 or 3 use cases that you'd advise them to start exploring now, tomorrow? Like, what are the opportunities that they need to really be looking at, or otherwise are at risk of falling behind for their people?
I think that the Learning and Performance Institute have captured quite a lot of these top opportunities when they did their, what did they do? They did their top 10 challenges for learning leaders.
Yep.
And I think there is this whole, number 1 was create a culture of learning, which we kind of touched on today.
Yep.
Number 2 was building AI skills and automation. And number 3 is learning in the flow of work. And I'd say, if you're a learning and development professional, I would definitely spend some time thinking about those 3 and probably in that order, because I think culture is where it starts ultimately. And I think then when you start to think about, right, how do I give people the opportunity to learn about this new technology in a safe and secure way, space and time, and also, then apply it. I think they're critical challenges that we all need to face.
And so you can do all of that, I would say. And then human nature being what it is, there will still be, we know there are plenty of people who will still feel quite risk averse around it and see possible threats, worry about their roles, what that might mean for them. What would you say to people who are feeling genuinely quite skeptical, cynical? Are they right to worry?
I think that as we talked about earlier, the approach that we're taking is very much around that this is really about complementing human agency. So co-pilot, not autopilot.
Yep.
Complementing skills, providing opportunities for people to kind of really reduce the mundane and focus on the more engaging and creative parts of their role. And I think those organizations that recognize human ingenuity and equip their people with the skills and the capabilities that they need to be their best competitive asset are going to be those organizations that really succeed in the future. So I think recognizing human ingenuity and reinforcing the importance of that is something that I would really reiterate as part of the conversations we have, because ultimately what we're trying to get to is people can use this as a tool, use this as a tool with the greatest effect to unlock their human creativity and give them the opportunity to realize their full potential. So I would say take some time to learn about it, understand it, and then ultimately work with it.
Yeah. And last question for you. So I really like that. It's something that's going to stick with me. I think about that message around human ingenuity, and that that's where we start. But cast our minds out 5 years into the future, wherever we might see ourselves. What's your prediction, Simon, for how the average worker will be using AI in 5 years' time? So what do you think? You and I are sitting here in 5 years' time. What's it going to be like?
Difficult to predict, isn't it, really? But I do think it will become a lot more ubiquitous, and people will be using it more and more, and not really, and it's sort of second nature. I think it will continue to be used as a tool
Yep.
to assist individuals, humans, in what they do, and to free them up from the tasks that typically AI is designed for. I think I would love to think that it will solve the problem of learning in the flow of work, because you've basically got a learning assistant alongside you that can help you pretty much understand ultimately what you need to learn, and they can help you through that. I think I really hope also that skills are valued as much as qualifications, because the speed of change we're seeing in technology, more and more, I think being able to develop the skills as opposed to go and learn, go and achieve qualifications, which are important. But I think being able to operate in this world at the speed of light, with technology, is critical. And I would love to see skills are being seen as equally as important as qualifications. So sort of skills-based hiring, skills-based analysis, I think is really, from an L&D perspective, something that I really hope is a consequence of this. And my personal view is that I really think that it's going to enable us to recognize the importance of thinking as much as it is doing, because you're going to need to be able to think about how to get the best out of your AI tool, as well as operate and effectively execute with it. So the idea of thinking, and in particular problem solving, deemed as equally as valuable as doing, I think would be a fantastic outcome, because I think too often people forget the value of doing some really good and deep thinking about things.
I mean, hearing that, it feels like a very exciting place to be. And I imagine anybody listening today will feel, actually quite inspired by that and encouraged by that. And really with that, I just want to say thank you, Simon, it's been such a fascinating conversation. I've been taking lots of notes here, things I'm going to be taking away. You've helped us think about what this means for organizational culture, what it means for skills, for roles, the role of leaders, and how we message this, how we talk about it, and really, what's in the future, and that lovely point about human ingenuity, those distinctive human skills, and really being able to optimize those, and how AI will support us with that. So back to our original question: are humans at risk of being left behind? I think the answer is no, if we can crack this. And I think with people like you and other great learning leaders out there, we have this in hand. So thank you.
I would say no, as long as we help people learn what it can actually do for them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes, fantastic. So thank you to Simon Lambert for a fascinating conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Are humans at risk of being left behind in the AI boom? What examples have you seen of how AI is impacting your organization, your workforce? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share them below. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of EZRA Asks. Thank you.